Welcome to our deep dive into Ashley Earls Davis's
Yeah.
The 850.
Oh boy, this is gonna be good.
We've got a great stack of sources for this deep dive.
Yeah.
A detailed analysis of the book,
Okay.
a study guide, and some extra tidbits.
Love it.
Today we are going to uncover why this novel,
All right.
which could easily be mistaken for just another coming-of-age story,
Right. Yeah.
is actually a powerful exploration of adolescent struggles.
Yeah, it's fascinating how Davis just takes us right into the mind of Senton Hart,
Right.
the troubled 13-year-old protagonist.
Oh, yeah.
We experience his cynical worldview,
Yeah.
like firsthand through this raw, unfiltered narration.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being thrust into the mind of a teenager skipping school,
Oh, yeah.
lying on crisp autumn leaves,
Yeah.
already feeling disillusioned with the world.
Totally.
I mean, that's how the story begins.
That's wild. And the writing style itself, this like fragmented, almost poetic prose,
Mm-hmm.
it really sets the tone. Is that what literary folks would call stream of consciousness?
Exactly. It mirrors Senton's chaotic mental state.
Oh, wow.
Davis doesn't just tell us that Senton's confused and angry, he makes us feel it
Yeah.
through the language itself.
Interesting.
And then almost immediately, we're thrown into this terrifying near-death experience
Oh, right.
with a freight train.
Yeah, it's such a gripping opening. This brush with death sets the stage
Yeah.
for the constant danger that Senton navigates
Right.
both externally
Yeah.
and within himself. It's no wonder he develops this cynical worldview.
Absolutely. And this feeling of being on edge is only amplified when Senton arrives at school
Oh, yeah.
and encounters Mr. Galbraith, the vice principal.
Oh, wow.
This is our introduction to the rigid, unyielding authority that Senton constantly butts heads with.
Galbraith is brutal, caning Senton for simply being off school grounds.
Oh, yeah.
You can practically feel the sting of each lash
Mm-hmm.
through Senton's narration. It's clear that for Senton, adults represent punishment and indifference,
Yeah.
not support.
It's a stark contrast
Yeah,
to the kind of guidance Senton gets from his Uncle Lloyd.
right.
Uncle Lloyd, a former prisoner of war,
Okay.
is physically absent
Interesting.
but constantly present in Senton's thoughts,
Oh, really?
offering this brutal advice
Yeah.
that justifies violence as a means of survival.
Uncle Lloyd is such a fascinating character. He's like a ghost from Senton's past, haunting his every decision.
Right.
And you can see how this toxic mentorship, shaped by Uncle Lloyd's own trauma, has warped Senton's perception of the world.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's being groomed for violence.
Right. But it's important to note that Davis doesn't glorify violence.
Oh.
He wants us to see the cycle of aggression and its devastating consequences.
Right.
The conflict with Senton's classmate Paul Fisher
Yeah.
and the planned fight at the bull ring, their designated fight spot,
Wow.
highlights how normalized violence has become in this world.
The bull ring is almost symbolic.
Hmm.
This space where kids are forced to settle their differences.
Oh.
Through brutality. And the build-up to the fight is so intense, you can practically feel the tension and anticipation in the air as the schoolyard becomes a battleground.
This tension isn't just limited to the schoolyard, though. Senton's home life is equally fraught.
Oh, wow.
His foster parents are emotionally distant,
Mm-hmm.
more concerned with religious appearances than genuine connection.
Right.
They constantly criticize Senton, creating this sense of emotional neglect and hypocrisy.
The dinner scene where they argue and threaten to dump him is so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Senton steals some beer and chips and runs away.
Wow.
It's a desperate attempt to find agency
Yeah.
in a world where he feels powerless.
Totally.
And this is where he meets Mrs. Edith Cochran at the train station.
Oh, okay.
At first, she seems like a breath of fresh air, kind, motherly,
Yeah.
offering him a snack.
It's a fleeting moment of respite for Senton.
Right.
But even this encounter is layered with complexity.
Okay.
Mrs. Cochran represents traditional values and faith,
Okay.
a stark contrast to Senton's cynicism. Her constant talk about her successful son
Okay.
and her belief in achieving dreams through faith in Jesus further highlights the gulf between their worldviews.
And it's on this train journey that Senton begins to piece together fragments of his past, including a significant detail about his Uncle Lloyd, escaping from the Sandakan POW camp during World War II.
This revelation adds another layer to Uncle Lloyd's character,
Right.
the brutality he witnessed and experienced. During the Sandakan death marches helps explain, though not excuse,
Right.
his deeply scarred worldview
Yeah.
and the toxic advice he imparts on Senton.
It makes you realize that Senton's story isn't just about teenage angst.
Yeah.
It's about the ripple effects of trauma across generations.
And this trauma is further mirrored in the Australian landscape.
Yeah.
That Senton observes during his journey.
Yeah.
He describes it as scorched and wilted,
Wow.
a stark reflection of his own emotional state.
There's also this unsettling parallel with the Beaumont children case that keeps popping up. In Senton's mind, it adds this layer of societal anxiety about child safety and underscores Senton's vulnerability. He is, after all, just a kid, trying to navigate a world filled with potential danger.
Then comes their arrival in Wyong. Mrs. Cochrane's sister, Gladys, enters the picture, and the atmosphere immediately shifts.
Oh, really?
There's a rising tension, a disturbing undercurrent to Gladys's interactions with Senton.
It becomes clear that Gladys has predatory intentions.
Oh, wow.
And Senton narrowly escapes her advances. This betrayal, coming from someone who initially appeared kind, is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that appearances can be deceiving and danger can lurk in the most unexpected places.
This scene is so powerful because it forces us to confront the reality of abuse within seemingly safe spaces.
Yeah.
Senton is already vulnerable and seeking refuge, only to be betrayed by another adult.
Yeah.
It adds a new dimension to the dangers he faces.
It's a devastating blow. But it also leads to a turning point. Senton escapes into the night and ends up hitchhiking on a psychedelically painted bus, heading for Queensland.
The image of this bus is so striking.
Boy, yeah.
It's a visual representation of Senton breaking free from societal norms, venturing into a more unpredictable countercultural world.
Wow.
It's a glimmer of hope.
Right.
A suggestion that maybe, just maybe, Senton can find a place where he truly belongs.
I love that.
It's fascinating how even as Senton escapes on this bus, he's still haunted by these figures of authority who have failed him.
Oh, yeah.
He imagines the Queen of England, you know, typically a symbol of power and order, transformed into this grotesque, mocking figure.
That's chilling.
Yeah, it's as though those who should protect him, the teachers, his foster parents, even the Queen herself, are complicit in his suffering.
It's a chilling image that speaks volumes about how deeply betrayed Senton feels. It makes you wonder if true escape is even possible when you're carrying that much baggage.
Exactly. Physical escape doesn't necessarily equal psychological liberation. The trauma that he's experienced continues to shape his perceptions. But there's also a glimmer of hope in this scene. The bus itself, filled with this mix of smells, sweat, pizza, incense, marijuana, it represents a stark contrast to the sterile, oppressive environments that Senton has just fled.
It's almost like this sensory overload is a kind of awakening for him. An introduction to a world beyond the rigidity and hypocrisy he's known.
And then there's Miriam, one of the passengers, the way Senton describes her scent. Ocean, moist earth, and honeysuckle.
That's beautiful.
It's so evocative. It's like he's experiencing genuine human connection for the first time, a connection rooted in something pure and natural.
It's a powerful contrast to the cold, harsh atmosphere of his foster home. But even as he finds this fleeting refuge, he's still struggling with this internalized shame, calling himself cockhead. It's a heartbreaking reminder of how deeply he's been affected by the abuse.
It really highlights the lasting impact of trauma and how difficult it can be to break free from those negative self-perceptions. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's delve into some of the overarching themes in the 8.50. One of the most prominent is adolescent rebellion. Senton is constantly pushing back against these rules and expectations. But it's not just typical teenage angst.
It goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
His rebellion is a direct response to the systemic failures he's experienced. He's been controlled and manipulated by adults, and his defiance is a desperate attempt to reclaim some agency.
Absolutely. It's a cry for help disguised as anger and defiance, and then there's the theme of identity. Senton is an orphan bouncing between foster homes, unsure of who he is or where he belongs. His journey is this desperate search for belonging and a sense of self.
His physical journey mirrors his internal struggle. He's running away from the places and people that have defined him. But he's also trying to shed the labels and expectations that have been imposed upon him.
The book doesn't shy away from the violence. That permeates Senton's world. Both physical and psychological. but it's not gratuitous.
Yeah.
It serves a purpose.
I agree. It's a reflection of these societal issues that the book is grappling with.
Right.
Senton has witnessed and experienced violence from a young age.
Yeah.
And it's shaped his worldview.
Yeah.
And how he interacts with others.
Right.
It's almost like he's inherited this legacy of trauma.
Precisely. And it's not just physical violence. The emotional and psychological abuse he endures at the hands of his foster parents is equally damaging.
Yeah.
It's this constant drip of negativity that just erodes his sense of self-worth.
And yet, despite all this darkness, there are these glimmers of hope.
Right.
The ending with Senton on this bus, full of people who seem to accept him, suggests that maybe he can find a different path.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of stories, there's a potential for healing and transformation.
Now, something I found particularly interesting was the use of Australian vernacular and slang. Throughout the book, it adds this layer of authenticity to Senton's voice and really brings his world to life.
I agree. The language is raw, sometimes vulgar, but always compelling. Yeah. It reflects the harsh realities of his environment.
Yeah.
And gives us a glimpse into his unique perspective.
And there are these moments of dark humor that surprisingly provide a bit of relief from the heavy subject matter.
That humor is a coping mechanism, both for Senton and for the reader. It allows us to navigate the darkness without being completely overwhelmed by it.
Okay, let's circle back to some specific details that stood out to us. I was struck by the recurring mention of the Beaumont children case, a real-life Australian missing children's case.
Oh, right.
It seems to weigh heavily on Senton's mind.
That reference speaks to Senton's vulnerability and his fear of becoming another victim.
Yeah.
It also taps into this broader societal anxiety about child safety and this lurking potential for evil. It's like he's constantly looking over his shoulder, aware of the dangers that exist in the shadows.
Absolutely. And then there's the Latin motto, Fortiter, Fideliter, Solicitor, which translates to bravely, faithfully, and successfully.
Right.
It appears several times in the text, and I was curious about its significance.
It's an interesting detail, especially given Senton's cynical outlook.
Yeah.
On one hand, it could represent a set of values he aspires to, even if he struggles to embody them.
But couldn't it also be interpreted ironically?
Oh, yeah.
Given Senton's experiences, it almost feels like a mockery of those ideals.
That's a valid point. It highlights the tension between hope and despair that runs throughout the book.
Right.
The 850 doesn't offer easy answers.
Yeah.
It invites the reader to grapple with these complexities and draw their own conclusions.
Yeah. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to ask you, what image or moment from the book has stayed with you the most?
It's that image of Senton on that psychedelic bus heading towards Queensland.
Oh, yeah.
Such a powerful symbol of his break from the constraints of his past, this journey into the unknown.
I agree. There's a sense of liberation in that image, even if it's tinged with uncertainty. It reminds us that even when things seem bleak, there's always a possibility of a new beginning. But before we get too carried away with the symbolism, let's circle back to a point you made earlier about Senton's experience with Gladys.
Oh, right.
That scene is so disturbing, and it raises some important questions about the abuse of power, especially within seemingly safe spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Senton is betrayed by someone who should be caring for him.
Yeah.
And this betrayal just reinforces his distrust of adults.
Right.
It also highlights the societal blind spot, the assumption that certain individuals are inherently trustworthy simply because of their age or position.
It's a chilling reminder that predators can exist anywhere, and it underscores the need for vigilance and awareness.
And this ties into a larger theme that the book explores, the damaging impact of toxic masculinity.
Okay.
Senton is surrounded by these negative male role models, like his Uncle Lloyd and Mr. Galbraith, who embodies this aggressive, domineering archetype.
You can see how these figures have shaped Senton's understanding of what it means to be a man.
Right.
He's constantly told to be tough, to suppress his emotions, to solve problems with violence.
Right. And the book challenges those narrow definitions.
Yeah.
Senton's journey is, in many ways, about unlearning those harmful lessons and forging a more authentic path.
It's about recognizing that vulnerability and compassion are not weaknesses, but strengths.
Now, another aspect we haven't touched on yet is the role of religion in the 850.
Oh, right.
It's a constant presence in Senton's life, but it's often portrayed in this negative light.
His foster parents used their religious beliefs as a tool for control and judgment, rather than a source of comfort or guidance. It's no wonder he developed such a cynical view of faith.
The book critiques this specific type of religious hypocrisy, where outward piety masks this lack of genuine compassion.
The scene where Mrs. Cochran is reading from the Bible while her sister is praying on Senton is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
It's chilling and ironic, highlighting the ways that faith can be twisted and manipulated.
Exactly. It underscores the idea that true morality goes beyond simply adhering to dogma.
So after diving deep into the 850, what are some key takeaways for you?
For me, it's a story about the enduring power of trauma,
Yeah.
the complexities of family dynamics, and this desperate search for identity and belonging in a world that can feel hostile and unforgiving.
Right.
It challenges us to confront these uncomfortable truths about adolescence, violence, and the ways we fail our young people.
I think that's beautifully said. It's a book that stays with you, prompting reflection on societal issues and our own roles in perpetuating or challenging these harmful cycles.
And as we wrap up, I'd like to pose a question for our listener.
Okay.
The book ends with Senton heading towards Queensland, a place often associated with escape and new beginnings.
Right.
Could this journey represent a chance for healing and transformation for Senton? Could he find a place where he can finally feel safe and whole?
It's a thought-provoking question, and it leaves us with this sense of cautious optimism. Even in the darkest of stories, there's always the potential for redemption and growth. The 850 is a challenging read, but ultimately a rewarding one. I encourage you to check it out and experience Senton's journey firsthand.
You might be surprised by what you discover about yourself and the world we live in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those stories that challenge and inspire us.